Joining me on Impact Catalyst today is Iqbal Paroo, and we're here to talk about the Conference on World Affairs, which is coming up shortly. Iqbal is the vice chairman of the board and also the co-chair of the programming committee. Iqbal, you and I have talked many times before. You've been on St. Pete X, and you have a huge and varied and successful history. I think at this point, you'd be welcome to start hospitals in countries or run universities and pretty much do anything you wanted. Why did you decide to spend your valuable time on the Conference World Affairs here in St. Pete?
Thank you, Joe, for inviting me. When one thinks about why am I spending time on this, the backdrop or the context to that would be that I have always viewed myself as a global citizen or a citizen of the world, because I was born and raised in Kenya, East Africa, when it was a British colony, and subsequently educated in Kenya and then in the United States. And as from our past discussions, you know that I have worked almost on every continent and speak several languages. And that's why I consider myself cross-cultured and a global citizen. And when I moved to St. Petersburg with my wife, now it's been a little over 10 years ago, I had a very, very busy consulting practice in healthcare and academic medicine. And I still do some of it, but I've cut back a lot, and especially since COVID, I've cut back even more. But I then got engaged on the international stage and became a board member of the United States African Development Foundation, which is the U.S. government agency, and which has taken me to the African continent 3-4 times a year for several weeks at a time. And in the last few years, I began to think about, that in spite of me being a global citizen, I'm actually a citizen of the U.S. and more importantly, I'm a resident of St. Petersburg. And I wanted to connect in St. Petersburg with some activities that would allow me to continue remaining a global citizen, but also bring value to an organization locally about my international experience. And through that process, I was very fortunate in being connected to the World Affairs Conference. I got to know the founder, Doug McElhaney, and Thomas Smith, the co-founder, and subsequently met with Diane, who is the president. And just a little over 3 years ago, once I understood what they were doing, I found a really great alignment with that organization and became more engaged, initially just as a board member, and as you referenced now, as the vice chair of the conference and the organization. And, what I find really, really rewarding is that this conference brings to St. Petersburg, and now because it's virtual, literally to the entire country, if not the whole world, individuals who give their time to the conference as speakers, as presenters, as moderators, and the content we deliver is of such high quality that it allows people, initially when we did it live in St. Petersburg, almost over 3,000 people would participate. And what they would get from that conference was a point of view and information, education, and an opportunity to engage with individuals from all parts of the world around topics that were contemporary, that were international in character, and most importantly, it allowed the people who attended the conference to get perspectives that may not necessarily always be easily available or accessible from just local information. I personally found it very rewarding, in spite of the fact that I have lived and traveled all over the world. I found it very rewarding, very informative, very educational. And the more I got involved, the more I began to realize that this was an incredible asset for this community. And in some ways, I found it like a diamond in the rough that we still hadn't yet reached the kind of audience that we could potentially reach. And I had a special interest in getting young people involved because the audience tended to be middle to sort of, later stage in life, people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. It tended to be predominantly people who were more white. And I just thought, this is first an opportunity to get more young people involved, all the way from high schools and in universities. And so we made some effort around that. I think we could still be doing more. But now that we have a virtual platform, I think it's unlimited, that opportunity. And I wanted to get more people of color involved, bring some diversity in audience, diversity in participation, diversity in playing a role in the conference itself. And I think this year, again, because of the virtual model, people who come to this conference are going to find out we have people from all over the world participating. And we have expanded the board. And I'm very pleased as the board has expanded that we've added lots of people with different fantastic backgrounds to the board. So I guess I'm coming across with my enthusiasm why I got involved and what we are doing now. I think in terms of the uniqueness of the asset in the community, one of our challenges was that we are a volunteer board. And, as volunteers come, there's only so much time. And as you know, because of our prior conversations, I also have a very, very busy, active life in many other areas. And it became clear that if the conference was going to grow, we needed to build internal capacity. And by that, I mean, excuse me, we needed to improve the systems and processes by which we work. We needed to know how to scale in content, scale in participation. We needed a website which was much more interactive, much more sophisticated. And back in 2020, all pre-COVID, and literally the end of 2019, actually, we started having conversations with individuals who could potentially help us with this. And honestly, the two barriers were that we needed some funding. The conference has always been free to the participants. We have lived on donations. But, once you start thinking of capacity and engaging staff to help you scale, the kind of resources we need, we didn't have. And I reached out to a friend and who's an amazing citizen of this community, Jim Arasti, through his family foundation. And he became a major sponsor and donor. He really believed in the conference because he's participated in the conference before. And he thought, just like I did, it's a fantastic asset to the community to bring. And his intention was that if we could scale and allow more people in this community to connect to the conference and therefore to connect to each other on international affairs, that he was willing to support us. And then we interviewed a number of firms to help us do the kind of work that is needed to accomplish what I talked about, which is scaling the conference, creating a much more vibrant and robust and interactive website. We ended up selecting the St. Pete group, and some of you may know Joe, who is actually interviewing me. And I knew Joe prior to all of this, but I have also seen his work and Catalyst and the Spark and all the things that they do in the community. And we found a right fit with them. And what was great was that the St. Pete group took this on not because it was another job for them. It is because they also believed in the power of the conference, and we found that they could be catalytic, that they could bring to us all their experience and knowledge, and therefore we could bring to the table the intellectual capital, the kind of people and information that would be great for the city. So I think we formed a great partnership. 2020 was our first year working together, and 2021 is our first virtual conference working with them. So I'm really hoping that what we embarked on as a journey to scale, to create a robust website, all that is actually paying off, because obviously in the midst of COVID, having a virtual conference, if we had not done all of that, I don't think it would have been possible for us to have a conference this year, because we can't do it in person. So just the ability to do a virtual conference has allowed us, through this partnership and through the funding from Erasti Foundation, Family Foundation, to actually now do what we are planning to do, which is to bring a conference not only to this community, but to people all over the world. And at the last count, I'm told we had in excess of 2,000 people registered virtually through our site. And I suspect by the time the conference is here on February the 23rd, by the way, it's 23rd to the 26th, we will have hopefully even more people participating from all over the world. And as I said, our program is very rich in content, very contemporary topics this year. So I look forward to the opportunity for lots of people to join in.
Wonderful. And I want to echo that appreciation for Jim. Along with my business partner, Herb Cohen, Jim has been the single most impactful support and just sounding board behind everything. And nothing that we do would exist without him. So I think you can't overstate how big of an impact he's made on the community through supporting what I do, through supporting the conference, and many other things too. He's an unsung hero that I'm singing about. So this is the first in a series of talks we're going to have about the conference. And so for folks who may not be familiar with it, and in lieu of really going into a general description, just to give them some specific flavor for topics, what are some of the topics that you find the most interesting? What are the areas you're looking forward to digging into this year? What draws you in?
So when we were restructuring getting ready for the restructuring of the conference, this was, again, as I said, pre-COVID. Part of our work with the St. Pete group was to examine the 8 years of archived material for the conference. And when I use the archive word, I use it loosely, because it's not that we had captured all the content since we hadn't videoed every session in the past, but we had material that we reviewed with the St. Pete group as our partner. And through their help, we designed now what we call pillars, which is that our past conferences tended to cluster around certain topics or what we call themes, which were in health and humanity and culture, economics and the environment and international relations. With the help of the St. Pete group, we then formalized this into what we now call our pillars. And so when we were looking at this year's conference, we picked 3 major key themes. And those themes were picked because we realized that the kind of things that are going on in the world today, which would be relevant to our audience, is what we should try to feature. And clearly, COVID, which has impacted the entire globe and continues to and will continue to impact us, and in general, understanding that this virus, COVID-19, which has literally turned the world upside down, for which, I believe the world was not prepared. And now we are learning, as the cliche goes, we are figuring it out as we are trying to solve the problem. Building the plane as you're trying to learn how to fly it. That's one of the center themes is going to be COVID. And in that, we're going to cover the science. We're going to talk about vaccinations, what works, what the challenges are. And the fantastic group we have assembled, brilliant people, are also going to talk about that, the world needs to get ready for potentially other such pandemic viruses in the future. And what we are learning from this now needs to get institutionalized so we are better prepared as a world in the future. And then we're going to cover all the related topics. How has COVID literally impacted our sociocultural life? How has it impacted sports, education, energy, economy, media, all the issues around false information and the challenges we have in making sure that people actually are informed and informed correctly. So there's a lot of work around the COVID topic that is going to be discussed at the conference. The second major theme we picked was, it's around international relations, but it's also around that the United States just went through the elections. And even though it's a world conference, the truth of the matter is that the US is viewed as the leader, the most powerful nation in the world. What we went through in terms of the change in how the US was positioned to the world in the last 4 years of the Trump administration, and I'm not making any value judgment. It is what President Trump decided how to position the United States against the world. It was more an inward looking, as you've heard, US first, etc. And in some ways, there are many people in the world who felt that the US had backed off its world leadership role in multilateral organizations, in world policy making, in creating world peace, advancing democracy. And again, as I said, this is not my value judgment. It is what happened and how the world viewed us. And now we have a new administration. The Biden-Harris administration is repositioning. In some cases, it is reversing. And in some cases, it is taking the lessons that it learned from the last 4 or 8 or even 12 and 16 years, from the Bush administration to the Obama administration, and looking at where the world is today and where we should be playing a role on the world stage. So it's pretty clear that we're going to re-engage as a global leader. And so we are addressing at this conference a whole host of topics related to what we call international relations, which is one of our pillars, in terms of foreign policy, multilateralism, global leadership. And we're going to talk about styles and global leadership styles. We're going to talk about issues that, in some ways, maybe a little sensitive. We're going to talk about, is democracy here to stay? Is it going to survive? What is the role of the emerging world? Or now, we can't even talk about China or India as emerging. They have already emerged. They are world leaders in their own rights. How does the US play with those leaders in those countries on the world stage? What happens to our relationship to Europe? And then we are going to address what about our relationship to Africa? What about our relationship to South America? And we have a very specific session on Africa. And as you know, I said I was born and raised in Kenya, and so I was able to put together an amazing group of people who are going to talk about what do Africans want for themselves? What is their vision? Not what the world thinks they need. What is it that they need from the world? So we're going to have a session around that. And we've also got added on to all our sessions a cultural element around music and art and film, and again, partly on the global stage, partly connected to COVID, partly connected to international relations. Because after all, music and the performing arts are global in nature in themselves, and they bring humanity together. And in some cases, we have had so much global tension between countries, between races, between ethnic groups. And we want to use the power of culture to bring people together. So we'll address some of that. And that gives me a segue into this whole issue around the tension in the United States, the tension in the United States, meaning between races and people, Black Lives Matter and our history around people protesting, the right to protest, civil versus disorder, the role of the police. We have an exciting sort of segment bringing in from the 1960s and 70s people from the Chicago 7, Lee Weiner, the famous musician Sonny Oakes, who sang protest songs, and his sister is going to talk about that. We're going to talk about human rights and issues that are happening in the world. And in some parts of the world where there's been tension and dissension between communities, a form of a tool that has been used called Truth and Reconciliation that has been used in Rwanda, been used in South Africa, in Ireland, in Kenya. So we are going to have a panel talking about what is truth and reconciliation. Can people really come together? Does it work? Where has it worked? What are the lessons learned? So we actually are, as you can see, have taken on a very aggressive and contemporary role in this conference.
Fantastic. And really important topics, but also important people that are really some of the best to speak to those topics coming and participating. With all those big topics, I want to finish up by bringing it back to St. Pete. What is the potential value, or why is a conference like this Conference World Affairs, which the underlying 501c3 is St. Pete in the world? Why is a conference like this important now and important for the future as St. Pete positions itself in the world?
So when it first started, the founders really had the intention of bringing this international education through speakers, through content, to the local community, because St. Pete, which was known as sort of a sleepy, aging town 20 years ago, has completely transformed in the last decade. Anybody who now comes to St. Pete is just amazed at the makeup of the community in terms of the people who live here, in terms of the art and culture, in terms of the culinary scene, in terms of sports. It is, and then you look at our downtown. You could be anywhere, such as the Riviera, and you could sort of say, wow, this looks really different. Or you could be on our beaches and say some of the finest beaches in the world are here. And so because St. Pete has transformed so much, it has attracted people to move here, not only from other parts of the United States, but a lot of people from other parts of the world are coming to live in St. Pete. And so because the character of St. Pete has changed, it became a natural for this conference to begin to grow. It's not surprising that when we met live, 3,000 people would show up. What our intent now, by making this conference scale and making it more available, and as I said, expanding it to other audiences, is to continue, one, reinforcing how amazing St. Pete is, to expose people from all over the world the nature and character of our city. So just as an example, when I connected to individuals who make up the panel on Africa from Kenya and Nigeria and Senegal and the Cameroon. These people, they've been to the United States, they've gone to New York, they've been to San Francisco, they've been to Chicago, but believe me, St. Petersburg was not on their radar. But once I gave them a sense of what St. Petersburg was, I sent them material. Several of them said to me, when we can travel, we're coming to St. Petersburg because they're so excited what's available here. So the value proposition for this city is twofold. One, we're exposing St. Petersburg to the world. Just the name of the conference, it is to the world because now people are connecting from everywhere. But we are also bringing the world to St. Petersburg. We are allowing the residents of this community to get exposure and connected to amazing people in person when they could meet and virtually now. And many of the people who are coming on to our program virtually, actually in the past, some of them have participated. We are fortunate this year that we've been able to expand our participants and speakers because it's virtual. They didn't have to travel here, so they could participate in the conference. And all of them are doing it pro bono, which I give my special thanks to all of those people who are doing that. And so, yeah, that's the value proposition. It's two-way. It's great for the city, and it's great for the people who didn't know about us to know about our great city. It's for both.
Well, Paroo, thank you. Thank you for supporting this conference and putting your considerable experience and passion behind it, and we'll all be the better off for it.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Joe.